Hi, it's Lee, and welcome to the Test Economist. EVs are the future. People don't want to be beholden to gas prices. They don't want to go to gas stations or service centres and don't want engine maintenance bills. They want the convenience of charging at home or at work and don't want to breathe in poisons anymore. Yes, the advantages to the consumer of an EV heavily outweigh those of ICE. Of course, there's a global movement higher up than that also. Internal combustion engines are damaging our planet and shortening our lives. So electric is certainly better for the consumer. Better except for one thing. The prices are too high. They cost too much to make. The likes of Toyota are able to offer very affordable and reliable ICE cars, even more affordable running costs when they use hybrid systems. But in reality, this is a problem that can be solved. If we look at first principles thinking, if we look at the sum of all the elements inside the electric vehicle rather than the cost of how much they are to produce, it's in reality the cost of putting all the elements together in order to make an electric vehicle that is making it too expensive. Of course, on top of that, there are other things that get in the way of these costs, such as unions or car dealerships. But this should be the aim of any good EV manufacturer, to simply be that good at manufacturing EVs in as best a way as possible to get the cost down in order to compete with the ICE equivalent. Cost of ownership of an EV has certainly helped, and as a result, it could be argued that removes about $10,000 or so off the cost of an EV when compared to an ICE vehicle, meaning potentially a consumer could justify spending that much more on a vehicle just because it's electric. In addition to that, an EV should potentially last about 250,000 miles, until perhaps the battery is not quite efficient enough, or at least batteries these days. We might eventually get closer to 1,000,000 miles even. In other words, there is a longer life in an EV compared to an ICE car, and thus more value. Really though, an EV manufacturer needs to be working on getting costs down as low as possible, without sacrificing drive quality too much. Sure, the Chinese have reduced costs quite a bit, but have significantly sacrificed the quality of the drive and vehicle. However, there are still enough consumers who do not place that as a high enough importance when buying a new car. They don't care about good brakes, handling, safety, or even a quality stereo. They're just happy enough to have an EV, at least for now. I would guess that in the future, a lot of these consumers may opt to buy a used Tesla over a brand new BYD, for example, if Tesla ever do depreciate that much. Yeah, that's a point, isn't it? The EV industry is still in its infancy, so much so that we barely even have used Model Ys out yet. Eventually, there will be more used, lower cost Model Ys or Model 3s that may end up competing with brand new ICE or competitor EVs. Personally, I would always buy a Tesla over anything, even if I could only afford a used one. But some consumers do insist on brand new cars. This is the objective for all EV manufacturers, including Tesla, hence why we hear all the efforts Tesla is still making to reduce parts and processes, thus lower costs, and reducing weight. Two very important elements when it comes to EVs, weight and cost. All EV manufacturers should be making similar efforts. They need to work out the fewest and lowest cost parts possible to achieve the required level of performance, safety, handling, luxury, etc., all at the correct level for their target market, and find the best sweet spot that is still profitable. In fact, very profitable, as a lot of those other EV cost savings that we discussed, aside from gas, well, that was all part of a legacy auto manufacturer's business model, like engine parts and servicing. They have effectively lost a large part of that business, although a great EV company has done a genius job in figuring out the minimum amount of parts and processes in order to put together an EV, and then managing to manufacture these parts together in the most efficient, fastest, lowest cost way possible. This is what a successful auto manufacturer looks like for the future. This is why Tesla uses things like structural battery packs and front and rear castings, because it achieves exactly what I've just said, removing hundreds of parts and processes. That is a huge jump. But you need to be brilliant at engineering to achieve this. It's not a simple process. It requires serious intellectual property. Well, that's just the manufacturing side on how to save costs in order to compete with an ICE vehicle. There are other sides too. For example, getting the cost of all these elements as low as possible in the first place, perhaps by negotiating some good contracts with mining and refining companies. But nothing can get the cost lower than doing the mining and refining yourself, along with all the other associated vertical integration along the way. Then there are others that will throw money at achieving this, not being able to let go of various parts and processes, and bearing a higher production cost. But they may have a brand name that allows them to pass on these additional costs and still make a profit. Brands like Porsche, Rolls-Royce, or Ferrari. The thing is though, they still won't be able to beat Tesla. A McLaren F1 had an outstanding engine that had over 100 horsepower per litre, amazing for a naturally aspirated engine of the time. But Tesla is the equivalent in EVs. No matter how much Ferrari spend on batteries, they won't outperform a 4680 cell. The Porsche equivalent will always be heavier and offer less range and performance. You'll always be getting less value for the money, which a Porsche consumer may not even care about, as they may have too much money. But a Ford consumer, and the majority of people, well, that's a different story. Tesla will have the lowest cost battery that also happens to be the lightest, most energy dense, and most powerful, and no one can get close. Tesla have probably been working on the 4680 cell for 5 years or something, with processes that Tesla have still not refined in mass production even to this day, with the most experienced and smartest battery and cell engineers on the planet, and of course a CEO that is orders of magnitude smarter and harder working than any other. This barrier to entry is likely to last at least the rest of the decade, and of course this cell is going to evolve rapidly over that time too, and use all sorts of other alternative chemistries along the way. As I said, EVs are a better product, and the consumer has decided and are currently willing to pay more like for like. But we could say the same about flying cars too. Oh wow, I'd love a flying car. That sounds even better than an electric car. Except it would be exceptionally difficult to manufacture cost effectively. Just like EVs are. Except that's the thing. Tesla are so amazing, they have managed this. No one else has. Now it's about scaling. Tesla working out ways of increasing the EV supply chain bandwidth and further reducing the manufacturing costs to find ways that the vehicle is more affordable for the masses rather than it being perceived more a luxury item, and make more of them with fewer parts and less cells. Manufacturing an EV for auto manufacturers is something that legacy autos would just put into the too hard basket. It's so difficult, costs an absolute fortune, and there's no money to be made at the end of the day. Not to mention it would totally cannibalize their profitable ICE business, so forget about it. Except there is one little problem. Someone didn't forget about it, and is doing everything they can to grow it, offering EVs at affordable, competitive prices, and not just basic, boring, low-quality EVs with minimal options, but instead the best quality, safest vehicle ever, coming standard with options that no other car company can even offer. So Legacy have no choice but to at least try to compete with whatever they have at their disposal today, in the hope that something eventually sticks. Everyone else who has tried to make a BEV to date has failed to make a profit, and Tesla are in the position where they are removing massive amounts of parts, processes, and weight to reduce costs even further, significantly, along with their own vertically integrated batteries that save more cost than anything else to date, and offer more energy density whilst reducing weight. And that's something we are seeing happening right now. The thing is, EVs are more expensive to make than ICE, because the bandwidth of the supply chain is that much bigger for ICE. The components are already there in that industry, the minerals are in abundant supply with lots of competition to reduce costs. The same can happen for EVs too, eventually. Due to the simplicity of a battery pack and electric motor, there's actually more potential to reduce costs, as you simply don't have to design the vehicle around the likes of an engine anymore, allowing more flexibility in design of the vehicle and more longevity compared to an engine. The thing is, it would appear these alternative ways of manufacturing are more advanced, complex, and require a higher level of engineering. It requires a company that is structured in a way that it can adapt to these challenges. It takes an insane level of engineering to assemble these parts into a vehicle at these competitive costs. The question is, are there even any more companies out there that can achieve this? Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.